in this country. And since we're talking about integrity, I'm confused as to why my Republican colleagues aren't talking about the lack of integrity when it comes to the president's family's visas. Let me remind y'all that Melania, the First Lady, a model, and when I say model, I'm not talking about Tyra Banks, Cindy Crawford, or Naomi Campbell level, applied for and was given an EB-1 visa. And what that stands for is an Einstein visa. Now, y'all that don't know, let me tell you how you receive an Einstein visa. You're supposed to have some sort of significant achievement, like being awarded a Nobel Peace Prize or a Pulitzer, being an Olympic medalist, or having other sustained extraordinary abilities and success in sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics. Last time I checked, the First Lady had none of those accolades under her belt. It doesn't take an Einstein to see that the math ain't mathin' here.
Okay, so Congress literally exploded yesterday, like not figuratively. I mean, the entire chamber erupted into absolute chaos. And it all happened live, in real time, while cameras were rolling. Here's what went down. There was a hearing, just a regular Tuesday hearing, right? Wrong. Because right in the middle of testimony, brand new evidence drops. Evidence that completely flips one of the biggest cases against Donald Trump. And lawmakers, they lost it. Both sides. Democrats screaming, Republicans pounding desks. The whole thing went viral within minutes. And here's the crazy part. This wasn't some leaked document that showed up at midnight. This wasn't anonymous sources or insider whispers. No. This was hard evidence, presented under oath, in front of Congress, with millions watching online. The kind of bombshell that doesn't just change a court case, it changes everything. Now you're probably thinking, okay, what evidence? What case? How does this flip anything? Yeah, we're getting there. But first, you need to understand just how wild this moment was. Because when I say Congress erupted, I mean people were yelling over each other. Security had to step in. The chairman was banging his gavel so hard, I thought it would break. Social media went absolutely insane. Truth Social crashed for like 20 minutes. Twitter was on fire. Even mainstream news channels cut away from their regular programming to cover it. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
The headlines alone are damaging. The phrase Trump next to Epstein in the same sentence is enough to dominate news cycles for days. Trump should release the Epstein files because at the end of the day, that is what this is about. It's about pressure, political, moral, and public.
And the person at the center of all this? Kash Patel. Yeah, Trump's former aide, the guy who's been defending Trump for years. He's sitting there testifying, and suddenly he drops information that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. Information that directly contradicts what Trump's legal team has been saying for months. Information that makes the entire defense strategy look like a house of cards. Here's why this matters so much. For over a year now, Trump's lawyers have been arguing one thing, one core defense. They've said Trump believed the election fraud claims were real, that he genuinely thought he won, that everything he did after the election was based on honest belief, right? That's been the whole strategy. If Trump truly believed it, then how can you prove criminal intent? Well, this new evidence basically says, yeah, not so much. According to what came out yesterday, Trump privately admitted his own words that some of these fraud claims were crazy. Like he knew. He apparently told people around him that certain allegations didn't add up, that the evidence wasn't there. But then he went out publicly and pushed those exact same claims anyway. Can you believe this? The man who's been saying for 2 years that he was fighting for election integrity apparently didn't even believe his own arguments. At least not all of them. And we're not talking about secondhand gossip here. This is coming from court filings, from testimony, from people who were literally in the room with him. And it gets worse, way worse, because this evidence doesn't just show Trump had doubts. It allegedly shows he intentionally pushed false information to state officials, to his own vice president, to the American public. We're talking about a coordinated effort to spread claims he privately knew were bogus. Now, the Republican side of Congress, they are furious, not at Trump, at the investigation. They're calling this a witch hunt on steroids, an abuse of power, political persecution. One congressman literally tweeted, and I'm paraphrasing here, that this is the deep state trying to interfere with democracy. Meanwhile, Democrats are basically doing victory laps. They're saying this proves everything they've been arguing, that January 6th wasn't some spontaneous protest, that it was planned, orchestrated, and now they have evidence. But here's what nobody's talking about, and this is the part that should scare everyone. This evidence was dropped during a congressional hearing, not in a courtroom, not through normal legal channels. Congress, which means this is political theater on top of a legal case. It's lawfare mixed with reality TV, and both sides are using it to score points before the next election cycle. So what happens now? Well, Trump's legal team is scrambling. They're calling this evidence inadmissible, taken out of context, cherry-picked, but the damage is done. The headlines are written, the clips are viral, and millions of people just watch Congress tear itself apart over whether the former president, who's currently serving his second term, by the way, committed federal crimes. This is where we are right now. A live congressional hearing turned into the biggest political bombshell in months, evidence that could completely reshape the criminal case in a country that's more divided than ever over what actually happened and what it all means. Yeah, welcome to 2025. The craziest part? This isn't even the whole story. There's so much more going on behind the scenes. Judges issuing warnings, legal teams scrambling, political operatives spinning like their lives depend on it, because in a way they do. This case could determine the entire direction of American politics for the next decade. Let me break down exactly what this evidence says and why it's causing such an absolute meltdown. Alright, so let's get into the actual evidence, because this is where things get really interesting, and honestly, kind of infuriating depending on which side you're on. The evidence comes from a filing, a massive 165-page document from Special Counsel Jack Smith. Now, if that name sounds familiar, yeah, he's the guy who's been investigating Trump for the past 2 years. Election interference, January 6th, all of it. In this filing, it's not just allegations anymore. It's got receipts. Here's what it says. According to Smith's team, Trump privately acknowledged that certain election fraud claims were, his word, crazy. Not questionable, not uncertain. Crazy. We're talking about specific allegations, the ones about voting machines being hacked, dead people voting by the thousands, bamboo ballots from China, the really wild stuff that got passed around social media and at rallies, and apparently Trump told people close to him that he didn't buy it, that the evidence wasn't there, that some of his own advisors were feeding him garbage. But then, and this is the key part, he went out and repeated those exact same claims anyway, to state legislators, to the Department of Justice, to Mike Pence, to rally crowds, everywhere. Now, why would someone do that? If you know something's false, why push it? Well, according to the filing, because it served a purpose. It created doubt. It fired up the base. It gave cover for challenging election results in multiple states. It was allegedly part of a broader strategy to overturn the outcome. And this is where the legal stuff gets critical, because intent matters, like really matters. If Trump genuinely believed the election was stolen, then his actions might be protected speech, political advocacy. Even if he was wrong, you can't criminalize someone for being mistaken. But if he knew the claims were false and pushed them anyway, that's a different ballgame. That's potentially fraud, conspiracy, criminal conduct. The filing goes even further though. It alleges that Trump intentionally lied to the public, state election officials, and his own vice president. Those are strong words. Intentionally lied, not mistaken, not misinformed, intentionally. And Smith's team says they can prove it with testimony from people in Trump's inner circle. Emails, text messages, recorded conversations, the works. One of the biggest pieces of evidence involves what Trump said to Mike Pence. According to the filing, Trump was told repeatedly by his own lawyers that Pence didn't have the authority to reject electoral votes, like it wasn't even a gray area. The law was clear, but Trump pushed Pence anyway, publicly, privately, all the way up to January 6th. And according to witnesses, Trump admitted he knew Pence couldn't do it, but wanted to create pressure. That's what the filing says. Come on. That's not political strategy. That's manipulation. And if the evidence backs it up, it's potentially criminal. We're not talking about normal political hardball here. We're talking about deliberately misleading your own vice president about his constitutional powers in order to pressure him into doing something illegal. That's next level. Now here's where it ties into the congressional hearing. Kash Patel was called to testify about his time working with Trump. And Patel, to his credit or fault, depending on your view, has been loyal, like ride or die loyal. So everyone expected him to defend Trump, to stick to the party line, to say the election concerns were real and justified. But something happened during that testimony, something unexpected, and I don't know if Patel got caught off guard or if he was trying to parse his words carefully, but he ended up confirming key details from Smith's filing. Not intentionally, maybe, but the damage was done. He acknowledged that Trump had expressed doubts about certain fraud claims, that there were internal debates about what was credible, that some advisors were more skeptical than others, and the room just exploded. Democrats immediately jumped on it. See, even Trump's own people admit he knew. This confirms everything. Meanwhile, Republicans were scrambling, trying to reframe it, saying Patel was talking about normal vetting processes, that every administration questions results, that this doesn't prove anything criminal. But the optics were terrible, absolutely terrible, because here's a Trump loyalist, under oath, basically validating the prosecution's narrative, and it was happening live, streaming, recorded, clipped, shared. Within an hour, the video had millions of views. Analysts were breaking it down frame by frame, and both sides were spinning it as hard as they could. Social media went into overdrive. Truth Social, Trump's platform, was flooded with posts, supporters calling it a setup, a trap, saying Patel was misquoted or that Democrats twisted his words, critics posting clips and saying the walls are closing in, that kind of thing. It was chaos, pure chaos. The hashtags were trending worldwide. Cable news had split screens showing the hearing on one side and reactions on the other. And then the judges got involved. Yeah, federal judges. Because while all this was happening in Congress, there were related court cases moving forward. And apparently, some judges were not happy with how Trump's legal team was handling things publicly. One judge issued a rebuke, basically saying Trump's lawyers were making statements to the media that contradicted what they were filing in court. Another judge warned about potential sanctions if the public messaging didn't align with legal arguments. Are you kidding me? Judges are now calling out Trump's team for playing the media game too aggressively. That's how messy this has gotten. And it's not just one court, multiple cases, multiple judges, all expressing frustration with what they see as an attempt to litigate in the court of public opinion rather than in actual courtrooms. These are federal judges, lifetime appointments. They don't issue rebukes lightly. When they start publicly warning lawyers, that means things have gone seriously off the rails. Trump, of course, responded the way Trump responds. Posts on Truth Social, calling it a witch hunt, saying the judges are biased, claiming the whole system is rigged against him. His base ate it up. Rallies were scheduled. Fundraising emails went out. The narrative shifted from defending the evidence to attacking the process. It's the same playbook we've seen for years. When the facts look bad, attack the people presenting the facts. But here's what makes this so dangerous. This isn't just a legal battle anymore. It's a political weapon. Both sides are using this evidence, this hearing, these rulings, to shape the narrative heading into future elections. Democrats want to paint Trump as a criminal who tried to steal democracy. Republicans want to paint the investigation as political persecution designed to destroy their movement. And the American people, we're stuck in the middle, trying to figure out what's actually true, what's spin, what's evidence, and what's theater. Because let's be honest, it's all mixed together now. The legal system and the political circus have merged into one giant spectacle. You can't separate the law from the politics anymore. Every court filing becomes a campaign ad. Every testimony becomes a viral moment. Every judge's decision becomes a talking point. So what does this evidence actually prove? Well, if you believe the prosecution, it proves Trump knew he lost and tried to overturn the results anyway through lies and pressure. Criminal intent, conspiracy, the whole 9 yards. If you believe the defense, it proves nothing. It's selective quotes taken out of context. Normal political hardball, protected speech. And the real crime is the investigation itself. The truth, probably somewhere in between. But that's not how this plays out in 2025. Everything is binary now. Trump is either a hero fighting corruption or a criminal destroying democracy. There's no middle ground, no nuance, just two completely different realities depending on which news you watch and which social media you scroll. And that's exactly why this congressional hearing mattered so much, because it wasn't about finding truth. It was about winning the narrative. And based on the absolute chaos that followed, nobody won. Everybody just got more entrenched in their position. The left thinks they finally got the smoking gun. The right thinks it's all a setup. And both sides are absolutely convinced they're right. The media coverage has been predictable. CNN and MSNBC are running segments about Trump's lies and criminal exposure. Fox News is running segments about political persecution and biased prosecutors. And people are watching the channels that confirm what they already believe. We're living in separate information universes at this point. Now let me walk you through what this actually means for Trump's case and what happens next, because this is where it gets really complicated. So let's break this down into what actually matters, because there's a lot of noise here and we need to cut through it. First, the legal impact. This evidence, if it holds up in court, is devastating for Trump's defense. Like catastrophic. The entire strategy has been built on the idea that Trump genuinely believed the election was stolen, that he was acting on advice from lawyers, that he had a good faith basis for challenging results. This was the immunity argument. This was the intent defense. This was everything. But if prosecutors can show Trump privately admitted fraud claims were crazy and then push them anyway, that defense collapses. You can't claim good faith when you knew you were lying. You can't claim immunity for actions taken in bad faith. The whole legal framework falls apart, and that opens Trump up to serious criminal liability. We're talking potential prison time, not just fines or political consequences, actual incarceration. Now, will that happen? Who knows? Trump's legal team is already fighting back. They're arguing this evidence is inadmissible, that it's hearsay, that it violates attorney-client privilege, that it was obtained improperly. Every legal trick in the book is being thrown at this, and maybe some of it sticks. Maybe a judge throws out key pieces. Maybe the case gets delayed until after the political window closes. That's how this works. It's a war of attrition. But the political damage is immediate and probably irreversible. Because even if Trump beats the criminal case, the headlines are written. The narrative is set. Millions of people now believe he knowingly lied about election fraud, and millions of others believe he's being persecuted for political speech. Both sides are locked in, and the divide just got wider. Second, the congressional angle. What happened yesterday wasn't normal oversight. It was political theater designed to influence public opinion, and both parties are guilty. Democrats wanted that hearing televised. They wanted Kash Patel on the stand. They wanted viral moments and sound bites. They knew this would dominate the news cycle for days, maybe weeks. Republicans played along because they needed to defend Trump publicly. Even if the evidence looked bad, they can't abandon him. Their entire party is built around his movement now. So they show up. They make speeches. They attack the process. They create their own viral moments for their base. It's all performance, all strategy. But here's the scary part. Congress is now directly involved in an active criminal investigation. They're subpoenaing witnesses, releasing evidence, holding hearings that coincide with court filings. That's not separation of powers. That's coordination or interference, depending on your perspective. And it sets a dangerous precedent because if Congress can do this to Trump, they can do it to anyone, any future president, any political opponent. The rules just changed, and the judges are noticing those rebukes weren't random. Federal judges are getting fed up with the circus. They're seeing cases that should be decided on law and evidence turn into media spectacles, and they're pushing back, which is good for the legal system. But it also means Trump's team has to be more careful. They can't just say whatever they want to Fox News and then argue something different in court. Judges are watching now, and they're not happy. One judge specifically warned that if Trump's lawyers continue making public statements that contradict their court filings, there could be sanctions, professional discipline, maybe even disbarment for the most egregious cases. That's serious. That's judges saying enough is enough. We're not going to let you turn our courtrooms into political rallies. Third, the immunity question. This is huge because Trump's lawyers have been arguing that presidents, even former presidents, have broad immunity for official acts, that you can't prosecute a president for decisions made in office, that it would set a terrible precedent and paralyze future administrations. And honestly, there's some merit to that argument. You don't want every president getting sued or prosecuted by their political enemies the moment they leave office. But this evidence complicates that argument, because if Trump was acting in bad faith, if he was knowingly pushing false information, then those weren't official acts. Those were potentially criminal acts. And immunity doesn't cover crimes. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. The whole point of immunity is to protect presidents making difficult decisions in good faith, not to shield them from consequences when they break the law. So the Supreme Court, which is probably going to weigh in on this eventually, has a really tough call. How do you balance protecting presidential power with holding presidents accountable for actual wrongdoing? Where's the line? What's an official act versus a criminal act? These are questions without easy answers. And yeah, the Supreme Court. Let's talk about that, because this case is almost certainly heading there. And the current court is conservative, originalist, textualist. They care about what the Constitution actually says, not what people wish it said. And according to one recent analysis, there's a school of thought called the unitary executive theory that could actually help Trump. It argues that the president has almost total control over the executive branch and can't be second-guessed by prosecutors for policy decisions. But there's a counter-argument, and it's gaining traction. It says the unitary executive theory doesn't protect criminal conduct, that presidents can be held accountable for breaking the law, even if they were acting in their official capacity, that the founders never intended to create a king who's above the law, and this new evidence might push the court toward that interpretation. We won't know for months, maybe years, but it's coming. The Supreme Court is going to have to decide whether Trump has immunity for his actions around January 6th, and whatever they decide will shape presidential power for generations. If they rule for Trump, future presidents will have massive protection from prosecution. If they rule against him, presidents will be much more vulnerable to legal challenges. The stakes couldn't be higher. Fourth, the political fallout. Trump is currently serving his second term, but his party is already thinking about the midterms, about state races, about who controls Congress, and this scandal is going to be front and center. Democrats are going to run on it. They're going to say Republicans support a president who lied about election fraud, who tried to overturn democracy, who belongs in prison, and they're going to hammer that message in every competitive district. Republican candidates are going to have to answer for Trump's actions over and over, in debates, in ads, in town halls. Are you with Trump or against him? Do you believe the election was stolen? Do you support the prosecutions? These are impossible questions for moderate Republicans trying to win swing districts. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't. Republicans, meanwhile, are going to double down. They're going to say this is proof the deep state is out of control, that Democrats are weaponizing the justice system, that the real threat to democracy is political prosecutions, not Trump, and their base will believe it. Fundraising will skyrocket. Rallies will be packed. The party will unite around Trump even harder. Every attack makes him stronger with his supporters. So who wins politically? Probably both. Democrats energize their base. Republicans energize theirs. And the country gets more divided, more tribal, more convinced that the other side is evil. Turnout will be massive on both sides. The midterms will be brutal. And whoever controls Congress after that will determine whether more investigations happen or whether everything gets buried. That's where we are. That's where this is heading. Fifth, and finally, what comes next? Because this story is far from over. The criminal case moves forward. More evidence will come out, more witnesses will testify, more hearings will be held, and every single development will be litigated in the media before it ever gets to a courtroom. We're in for months, maybe years of this. Trump's team is going to fight every step. They'll appeal every ruling, they'll challenge every piece of evidence, they'll try to get different judges, they'll file motion after motion, they'll drag this out as long as possible. And they'll use every moment to fundraise and campaign and keep the base engaged. That's the strategy. Delay, deny, and dominate the narrative. Make this take so long that people get exhausted and stop paying attention. Prosecutors, meanwhile, are going to keep building their case. They've got momentum now. They've got evidence that's making headlines. They've got judges who are increasingly skeptical of Trump's tactics. They're going to push hard for a trial. And they're going to push for convictions. They smell blood in the water, and they're not backing off. But here's the wild card. Public opinion. Because ultimately, whether Trump faces serious consequences depends on what the American people think. If polls show overwhelming support for prosecution, prosecutors will be emboldened. If polls show the public is tired of it, there might be political pressure to wrap things up and move on. We're in uncharted territory here. The other wild card? Trump's health and age. He's not a young man. These legal battles are stressful. Court appearances, depositions, the constant pressure. At some point, does his health become a factor? Do we end up with a situation where he's too ill to stand trial? It sounds crazy, but it's a real possibility. And what about his supporters? If Trump gets convicted, if he actually faces prison time, what do they do? Do they accept it? Or do we see protests? Maybe worse. There's a segment of Trump's base that's convinced this is all tyranny, that he's being persecuted. If he goes to prison, some of them might see that as justification for extreme action. That should worry everyone. So yeah, Congress erupted, evidence dropped, the case flipped, and the entire country is now watching to see what happens next. Will Trump face prison? Will he beat the charges? Will this all get swept away in political chaos? Nobody knows. The only certainty is more chaos, more headlines, more division. But one thing's certain. This is the biggest political and legal story of 2025, and it's only going to get crazier from here. Every week brings new developments, new evidence, new witnesses, new drama. It's exhausting, it's overwhelming, and it's not stopping anytime soon. Stay tuned, because next week, we're diving into what the Supreme Court is actually going to do with Trump's immunity claim. And trust me, you're not ready for what's coming. The legal arguments are wild, the implications are massive, and the decision could change everything. We're breaking it all down. You won't want to miss it.